Welcome to the Beyond Ordinary Women podcast. Every 2 weeks, we post podcast versions of one of our free training videos, or you can access our videos now at beyondordinarywomen.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, I'm Kay Daigle of Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, or maybe you're watching on video. We are so thankful that you've joined us. Our special guest today is Jodie Niznik. Jodie is an author, a speaker, a podcaster. She has a podcast called So Much More, Creating Space for God, that is wonderful. She's a DTS grad, and she's been with us before. You can see or hear some of the things we've talked about before if you go to our website and search for her. But today, because we talk primarily to women who are in some sort of leadership position, it doesn't have to be anything major. You don't have to be running a whole ministry, but perhaps you lead a committee, perhaps you lead a small group. There are many ways that you can be a leader. And so you're the people we're talking to today. And one topic that we keep emphasizing, and we have other resources on this topic, is really about soul care. And so I've invited Jodie to talk to you and to me about personal retreats. So Jodie, as we think about nourishing our souls for everyone, but particularly leaders, but this will be helpful to anyone, I think. Every believer needs to have some time to nourish their own souls. But why should a retreat be a regular part of our lives, especially of leaders' lives?
Yeah, well, I think if we're specifically first talking to leaders, I think as leaders, we are crafting experiences and encounters with God for others all the time. And it is really critical for us to pull away and make sure we're also getting that spaciousness with the Lord. So I think that's the critical need, is that we're pouring out. I mean, I'm sure it's been said 1,000 times, even in Bow, is that we pour out from fullness and not emptiness. And I think a lot of times when we keep creating spaces for other people and we neglect that time for ourselves, we become emptier and emptier. If we're just talking in general, if I can also say that, I think there's this rhythm of work and rest that God sets up from the very, very beginning. And he models for us good boundaries when he takes a day of rest on the seventh day, when he instills Sabbath as one of the very first things for the Israelite community. He is saying, you are not defined by your work, and I want you to pull away and rest in me and know that I am sufficient and can provide for all the work that needs to get done in the amount of time that I've given you. And so there's this kind of rhythm of work and rest, rhythm of Sabbath that we have every week in our life, or should have some sort of rest in our week. But I think retreating is something else that, I mean, even the Israelite community models for us. They took the seventh year off when they were plowing the fields and let the land rest. There was something called a year of Jubilee where they released all the slaves after 50 years. So there's these other kind of larger markers of time that God instilled back in long, long ago as spaces for us to pull away and just do a little something different and spend a little different time with the Lord. And so I think as leaders, we need it to fill our soul, but just as Christian women, God invites us to pull away and spend time with him so that we can just know him better.
Absolutely. And to do that often requires trust, doesn't it? Really, faith that he will give you the ability to complete your work in the remaining time. if you're a leader, you're responsible for a lot of things. You really have to trust God and say, I'm going off for a day to take a retreat for myself. And yet it's so necessary, just as you said, as people have always, as you reiterated a while ago, that you're pouring out and you've got to take in. And it just doesn't really fit with our culture, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think you hit on one of the key resistances is that so much is demanded of us. It is really hard to pull away. We live over full lives. If it's not the leadership and the ministry that we're stewarding, it's all the other responsibilities that are also in our life, demanding our attention and care. And so it is very difficult to find space and resources to pull away for a little bit of time and slow down and rest. And I think there's also this kind of low level simmering anxiety when we finally do pull away. It's really hard to settle our soul into a place of stillness and rest because we are thinking about the thousand things that we have left behind that are not done yet. And so it requires a great amount of trust for us to say, God will provide. If he's called me to this, he's given me, it is within the wise boundaries that he's set up for me. And I do have to trust him. I have to trust that this is the best thing that I can do. Pulling away and spending time with God will actually multiply my time when I come back because I will be more rested. I will be more focused. I will be doing the things that God is inviting me to do and not the things that the world may be pulling me into that God didn't invite me to. And I think clarity is one of the main reasons, maybe not one of the main reasons, but is a key reason for pulling away and having a retreat, is so we know, is this really is God calling me to do this, or have I called me to do this?
Or sometimes it could be that the church has called you to do it.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Putting pressure on you to do too many things as well.
100%. Yes.
And it's hard to discern that sometimes.
It is. And I think retreating is discernment space. Mm-hmm.
Right. I totally agree with that. So what is a retreat and what isn't a retreat? I mean, how do we define a retreat actually?
Yeah. And I think this is a really critical question because a retreat can be a lot of different things. A retreat is not a week away in the mountains, although that would be lovely. And maybe that is something that we can actually have, every once in a long while to pull away for that kind of extended time. But I think a retreat can also be a 3-hour block of time where we turn our phone off, we go to a beautiful space, or we find a quiet, undistracted space, and we purpose to be still before the Lord, be spacious in our relationship with the Lord, and spend extended time with him. So I think a retreat can be actually quite small and doable for most people. And I do think longer periods of time are really, really helpful, especially like an overnight is really, every time I have done an overnight retreat, I come back energized, renewed vision. I'm surprised by how the Lord has shown up and redirected my steps. So it has been critical for me to have those overnight spaces. But in lieu of that, the 3 hours, sometimes on a Saturday morning, has also been very filling for my soul and helpful.
Well, and I just did the guided retreat that you have written just a few weeks ago, as we had talked about taking this topic. It was about 3 hours that it took me to do it, and it was very refreshing. And I'll talk more about that later, but 3 hours was really made a difference. It did make a difference. And It was very, very helpful, although I've enjoyed longer retreats before too. So, what are the things we might do on a retreat? I mean, if you're just out there, if you're in our audience and you think this sounds really good, but have no idea what to do, where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, I think there's some key components to what is it that you want to do. The first thing is unplug. You tell the people around you you are unavailable for this amount of time and you turn your phone off. I think that is critical. To be unreachable for just a short amount of time makes us actually reachable by God. And when we are bombarded with knowing text messages are coming in or having to answer questions about ministry or family or anything, it is just enough distraction to pull us out of that space that we're trying to create to be with God. So I would say the first thing is to unplug digitally. The other thing I think is critical for retreating is to pay attention to our body. And that may mean that the first thing we need to do is take a quick nap and to rest and not keep pushing. I think a lot of us arrive at the need for a retreat because we are exhausted. We're physically exhausted, we're emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted. And so give yourself a lot of grace and ask, what do I need to do right now? And it may need that you need to rest, and that's okay. The other things that I really love to do in a retreat is bring a journal and my Bible. And I like to start by looking back over the season that I've been in and just asking the Lord, what was good about this season? What was hard about this season? What do you want me to notice? So I spend time looking back, and then I like to kind of assess where I am in the present. And then I like to spend time looking forward with God and asking Him to redirect my steps. And we can get a little bit more into that as well. But I also think just another thing I think is critical for retreating is delighting in God. So if you have a more extended time, what is delightful to you? Is it going on a really slow walk and looking at flowers? Is it painting or drawing? Is it dancing? Is it, is there some sort of creative something that just delights your soul and you don't normally get to do it? Just create a little space to also do something fun and delightful, to create something or do something physical that is just delightful for you. So those are just the general kind of components that I think need to be a part of a retreat.
I was part of a retreat when I was on church staff that the whole staff went to do a retreat. And when we got there and heard our speaker the first time that, we were all together and she was preparing us for what we were going to do, she let us know that we were going to be silent for the next, all night. And many people had roommates. Was a church paying for this, And so we had to be quiet. We could not talk with the people in the room with us, and we could not talk to them at dinner. We could not talk to them at breakfast, that we were there to be with God and to hear from Him. And I know that was really challenging, particularly to some of the young men. They were they were almost angry that this is what they were going to do. I think they saw themselves playing basketball together, having games together, just guy stuff. They were anticipating that was going to be their retreat. And instead it was a retreat with God instead of fun and games kind of retreat. So I do think sometimes when we think about, like, I've been on many women's retreats, and it does seem like a lot of it is filled with just getting to know one another, having time together, enjoying one another. But I've appreciated the retreats that were more than that that actually called us to go and be with God for a while by ourselves.
Yeah, and I would say that's two different kinds of retreats.
Yeah.
The traditional women's retreat, pulling away. I always come home more tired from those because I've stayed up late and I've made relationships, and they're beautiful and important seasons. But this retreat that I'm talking about, and I think what you even just described that your staff went on, is really a time to pull away to a different pace so that we can rest with God, so that we can gain some clarity on what God wants. I think, an important principle that we see in scripture is when God speaks. I love that passage in First Kings with Elijah. When God speaks to Elijah, it is not in the earthquake, it is not in the fire, it is not in the, all of these tumultuous things. It's in the quiet whisper. And I think that we have to let our soul settle and still so that we can hear God. And it's when we get quiet, which is uncomfortable for us because we are not used to being quiet. That is when our soul kind of settles a little bit. And I think we can start to hear God's voice. God, of course, he can speak to us however he wants. He is God.
Right.
But the scriptural principle in that passage is that God tends to speak in the gentle whisper. And we have to attune ourselves to be ready to hear his gentle whisper. Because it's very easy to miss God. We can miss God because we get too consumed with our own busyness and things. I think it's interesting, the retreat experience you went on. And I would say to anybody listening, I would encourage you to if you're going with other people on a retreat, let them know what kind of retreat it is. Those guys might have been a little more prepared if they had known this is where we're going. And maybe they were told and they didn't, they just
No,
didn't listen.
I don't think we knew. The speaker was from out of town, so she came in right before the retreat, and I don't even know if she had definitely decided she would have us be, silent. It wasn't forever. It
Yeah.
was just after our first meeting together until through breakfast the next morning until we got back together. We were supposed to be silent, but even that was quite a challenge for some
Oh,
of the
yeah.
people. I don't think they had ever been called to be quiet. Maybe
Yeah.
in school when they were little boys, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing as you talk about what you would do on a retreat, one thing that this speaker had us do, one of the questions that she had us ask is, what are you grieving? And it was a really good question. I did not realize how many things in my life I was grieving until she forced me to ask God what those things were. And the more I sat by myself that evening, and thankfully I did not have a roommate, so I was never tempted to talk to anybody else. But the longer I sat there, just the more things that I thought of that I was grieving. And that is really hard on your soul to grieve and be so busy that you can't acknowledge it or even consider it because you feel like I can't think about that right now.
Yeah. And I think, gosh, that's a beautiful question because if there's anything we want to avoid, it's pain. And so we don't take the time to consider what was disappointing about the last season. Where did God not show up? And I thought he was going to. And of course, we have to reframe that because it's not that God didn't show up, it's that we didn't receive what we deeply wanted. Where am I just sad about the way things turned out? Where was it really hard? And I think when we get really honest with God about those things, we actually invite him into the pain and we start to see that he's doing other things, things that are maybe not what we expected, maybe not what we wanted, but he can help us through those spaces of sadness, which actually brings us to a healthier place on the other side, makes us more effective as leaders when we've really dealt with that deeper part of us. Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah, it was a really good question. And of course, it was followed with, can you give these burdens to God? Can you set those aside and trust Him in
Mm-hmm.
grief and in those situations? So it was a really challenging retreat in
Mm-hmm.
many ways. It was very good. I've also been on like a day retreat of where it was a group, so it was a silent retreat again, but it was only like maybe 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and those were good retreats too. I really enjoyed those. And again, somebody gave us some questions to think about, or some verses to consider, some reading to listen to before we went out. So, in some ways, your retreat was sort of set up for you, which, as we talk to these leaders online, they may not have that. But you have just done this with the retreat, and it's the one that I mentioned earlier that, let's see, it's called Guided Retreat for Entering a New Season. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you're hitting on is when we finally do pull away and make space to go on a retreat, a lot of times we're lost as to what to do with the time. And I really felt like I wanted to help people in that space and guide them through God's word to do some things to help you enter into a new season. It's called the guided retreat for entering a new season, but it's really just a guided retreat for starting a new day sometimes. And what it does, though, it has three movements. And that first movement is looking back. And like you said, just asking God, what was good? What was really hard? What do I need to process with you? So spending some time looking back over whatever season it was. And then the second part is really assessing our present circumstances. What season are we in? What things need to move forward with us? And I think Henry Cloud calls this metabolizing. So we're taking that past experience, and just like we do with food, our body takes the vitamins and the nutrients we need. We learn and we grow from those things and we get rid of the rest. And that's really what we want to do in this kind of assessing the current season is what needs to come with me? What responsibilities and roles do I have that God is fully aware of? And so those things, whether they're constraints or gifts, callings, those things move forward. So we kind of recognize what those are. And then the third movement is now, where are we going, Lord? Is there a new direction you're leading me in? Is there a next step that you want me to take? Do you want to shift my focus in any way? Perhaps it's just clarifying it. Perhaps it's just God comforting you that He is present with you and He has been with you and He will continue to be with you. So that's the movement of this particular retreat. It's all centered around scripture and guiding and letting God's word actually be the thing that pulls these things out of us. A few questions, of course, but mostly I really wanted us just to sit in God's word and let the word be what informs us, and the Spirit using the living and active word to inform us about how He wants us to move forward.
You do a great job moving the group or the individual through verses and through those movements that you've just described. It was really helpful. When I did it, I was really doing it more in preparation for this conversation that we're having than for feeling like I needed a retreat for entering a new season. But when I got in it, I realized I'm still somewhat entering a new season. We're at a new church over the last couple of years, and we're still entering it in a lot of ways. We're not, firmly firm. That's ridiculous. But you know what I mean.
Yes,
We're
I
just
do.
not we're just not totally settled.
Still
There.
figuring it out.
We're figuring
Yeah.
it out. And so I really appreciated all of your questions and your guidance and the verses that we looked at. It was really very helpful to me. And the more I was into it, the more I thought this really is helpful for anyone. They do not have to be in a new season. It could just be that God's speaking to them about a new season and they aren't even aware of it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's another really important point to note is when, we've talked a lot about being exhausted and that being a trigger for us knowing we need to go on a retreat. But I think there's also sometimes this knowing God is got something for me. Like I know it kind of deep in my soul, but I cannot figure out what it is. And I think there's this sense that there's something changing or God is moving me in a new way. And that's where I think doing something like this to slow down and be guided actually helps us with that discernment process. So I think there's this kind of like little tap on our shoulder and we're saying, okay, I don't have time. I don't have time. Or, I'm sitting with you every morning, but I'm just, then I've got to rush out the door. That's where I think that's a critical space to just say, okay, I am making the time because whatever God has to say, it is so worth hearing. And yeah.
I think sometimes we're afraid of what we think God is saying to us, though, don't you?
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I've felt that way before. I felt like, oh, I don't know if I want to know what you want to tell me, Lord. I'm nervous about that. I think that goes back to the trust issue and believing that God is good. I just recently heard that the root of sin is believing that God doesn't want the very best for us, that God isn't inviting us into the very best place. And I thought, well, that is a really interesting way to put it, because as soon as we start doubting God, we start choosing our way over his way, and it's never better. It's never, ever better. God's way is always the best way, even when it's really hard, even when it leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. It's still better because we're with God.
And we just like to be comfortable, or at least I do. I mean,
I do too.
Comfortable. I don't really like change. I really just like to stay in my comfortable place and do the comfortable things that I'm already doing and not be challenged beyond that. That's just not always what God wants. It's not for our best, really, to get too comfortable.
Well, no, it's not. We don't grow. When we're comfortable, we don't grow. And we're not forced to seek God for his sustenance of us. We're not seeking him, and we're not being transformed. So comfort actually may feel really good to our flesh, but it doesn't lead us to be the women that we want to be. When we think about who is it that I want to be in 5 years, it's going to be uncomfortable to get there. It's not an easy walk in the park. It's a climbing of a mountain. It's going to take some preparation, and it's going to take some sacrifice to be the people that we deeply long to be. Those people that we want to be, that we envision ourselves as, they don't arrive there without a few bumps and bruises.
That's a good way to put it. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we've talked about the retreat?
I think I would just add my personal experience is when I was in a season of extreme busyness, I didn't take space for retreat. And I think it really cost me because I stayed in some places and I kept saying yes to things that maybe were not the best yes for me. And it was when God actually helped me cease. And sometimes he does that in some pretty extreme ways. Sometimes we do it because we physically exhaust ourselves and we get sick and we wind up landed in bed for multiple days. That's not the retreat we want. That is not the retreat. That's like forced bed rest. And yet God will help us cease and give us some clarity in those spaces. So I guess for me, I would just say it's almost like taking your vitamins, right, to stay healthy. Retreating is absolutely 100% worth the sacrifice that you're going to make to take a retreat. And if you don't know what to do, there are a ton of great resources. Of course, I would love for you to use the guided retreat that I've created. And I will say there is a small fee for this retreat just because we paid video production and some other things. However, if that is at all a problem for you, Kay's going to have my email in the notes and you just reach out to me. I will give it to you because I want you to take this retreat. And so I don't want anything to stand in the way. Cost should never prohibit you from receiving the resources that you need. So just know I will do that with joy. I won't even ask a second question about it. So if it's not this resource, though, there are other resources out there to help you take space away and retreat and to guide you into that space. I would just encourage you to do it.
So how can the audience connect to your retreat, to your podcast, to the other resources that you have, your Bible studies? How did they get to all of that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website, which is Jodie Niznik, Niznik. So it's jodieniznik.com. And everything is there. You'll find the retreat there. You'll find a link to my podcast, which is a scripture meditation podcast. And you'll find links to my Bible studies, which have spiritual formation practices embedded in them. So that's the easiest way to find me.
That's great. And Beyond Ordinary Women also has some other videos and podcast episodes and articles on soul care, not specifically about personal retreats, but just different aspects of soul care, what soul care is, what that means. If you go to beyondordinarywomen.org and go to the menu at the top, go to leadership development, and then go to general leadership and you as a leader. So there's several steps, but it's leadership development, general leadership, and then you as a leader. And we also have some articles on our blog, and you can search on the blog for soul care and find everything that we have. We also have a media list that you can look at that will sort by topics if you choose to do that, to find the same articles, whatever you think is the easiest, or just contact us. Email us at beyondordinarywomen.org, go to our website and contact us, and that works as well. Thank you, Jodie, for taking this time, and thank you for your generous offer for those who don't feel like they can pay for that guided retreat, because it is so well worth it. I really appreciate your taking this time to talk about this with us, to encourage the leaders out there to do this. It's really an essential in a leader's life, I believe.
I agree. I believe it's also essential. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk with you, Kay.
Oh, we love having you. Thank you for being with us once again. And we will see you next time. And we hope that you will go and look at our resources, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond Ordinary Women podcast. You can find more podcast episodes and other resources for leaders by going to beyondordinarywomen.org. This podcast is produced by Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries. Our production team includes Diana Anunda, Evelyn Babcock, Kay Daigle, Sharifa Stevens, and Deborah Herring. The theme music, Back in Stride, was written by Don E. Miller, produced by Glenn W. Cranford, and used courtesy of Christina K. Miller.